I'm here sitting on the ground with everything that we're going to need for our blocking process. So the first is obviously your finished project. So it could be anything that you make with your yarn. And typically this process will work best for natural fiber yarns. So for instance, this is made of wool. This is a superwash wool blend that I'm using here. But if you have like 100% wool, or if you have like a cotton blend or 100% cotton, any of that will work really well. I have wet blocked lots of those items before. So I know that it will work for that. I know a lot of people are asking if it will work for acrylic yarn, and I'll say this, I don't think that it will really like have the same benefit. So a lot of the benefit we're going to see here is that, you know, the shawl will like stretch open a little bit more. Some of the detail is going to come out more, and it's going to lay a lot flatter, and it's going to hold that shape. So acrylic yarn is not necessarily going to have the same effect there, but you, by going through this process, are still going to be like washing your project and using a soap on it. So it's going to like smell fresh. It's going to be clean. So, you know, you might see some slight effect, but I still think it's worth doing. If anything, it's going to get you into the habit of blocking your projects. So by the time you want to try working with a natural fiber yarn, you're already going to know exactly what to do. And then that's when you'll really see the benefit of it. So anyway, have the shawl ready to go. I have this wash basin with a wool wash. This is from Tuft Woolens. It's very good. I only have this much left because I have been using it on everything. So highly recommend this wool wash soap. And you could just use your sink, but I tend to prefer using a wash basin like this because I know that this is clean. Whereas I know that my sink had spaghetti in it or whatever it is. You know, I don't want to put my project into the same place that food waste is going. So I like to use this so I can ensure that I'm coming out with a clean shawl and not anything else. You'll also need a towel that is big enough to roll your project up in. So mine is pretty big, so I'm using a beach towel just to be safe. And then you'll need these foam boards. That is going to be the very last step of the blocking process. So foam boards and some kind of pin. You can either get pins like this that are all together in one straight line, or individual pins. These long pins are really good for straight, flat sections of the shawl. So for instance, like the top border of this shawl is all flat. So those long pins are going to be really useful for that. But then there are other areas like, you know, the corner here that we can't use this big long strip. So we're going to need these. And you could do it all with just the small pins, but these make it so much easier. So I highly recommend getting some connected pins like this, because trust me, I have blocked shawls with individual pins, and oh my gosh, it takes way, way longer. So these connected pins are like a lifesaver. Highly recommend. So anyway, that is everything you're going to need for blocking, and all that's left is to just get to blocking. So let's head over to the sink and get started. All right, so we're here at the sink. We're ready to get started with our blocking. So first things first is we're going to take our wool wash. I'm going to turn on the water here and just kind of run the water over the soap. You could just leave it in there while it fills up. That's kind of what I do. Just let a decent amount of the soap come off of the bar. That's kind of why I like to hold it in my hand and twirl it around like this so that I know the soap is coming out into the water. You might be able to see some bubbles in the water. This soap isn't very bubbly, but you can kind of tell that it's going into the water because it's going to be a little bit opaque. So I like to just kind of rub the soap around in there. And just let the basin fill up. But at a certain point, I'll take the soap out. So about now, I would say the soap can come out. And then we're just going to let the basin fill up a little bit. Let me switch the angle so I can show you what this is looking like. Okay, so I switched the angle so that you guys could all see what the water looks like. So I know that I have enough soap in here when I can see that the water is a bit opaque and not crystal clear. So this to me tells me that I have enough wool wash in here, so I can take the bar of soap out and then keep filling it with water until it's maybe halfway full or maybe a little bit more than halfway. So I'm just going to let that fill up and then I'm going to add my shawl. Okay, so I have added my wool wash to warm water here. I'm using warm water to help relax the yarn and help the stitches kind of like settle into where they're gonna naturally lay. So right now the bath just has wool wash and warm water, but this yarn is hand dyed yarn by me. I hand dyed all of this yarn myself except for the mohair, but everything else is hand dyed. And I use an acid dye procedure. So sometimes when you block and you're using just regular sink water like this, that water can be basic. And so you could actually be affecting the color fastness of your colors in the yarn if I dip this acid dyed yarn right into this potentially basic solution. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if I dunk this in, I might see some bleeding, which that's basically when the color starts to come off of the yarn a little bit. So no fear, there's a very easy way to fix this, and that is basically just by adding vinegar, which is an acid. We can add a little bit of vinegar into our wash bath, and that will prevent any kind of bleeding that we might see otherwise. So I'm just going to pour the vinegar right into there, and I'm going to mix it a little bit. And all that's left to do is just add our shawl. So I'm going to just gently dip the shawl into the water, and I'm going to push it into the water. And you can feel, actually, like, you can feel the water going into the yarn as you push it in. So what you do once it's in the bath is just kind of massage the project all around and just make sure that the whole thing is wet. So I can pull it up here. You can see now that it's wet, it's already stretching out a lot, just even by being wet a little bit. So we're gonna just like gently massage it around. You don't need to agitate it. Actually, if you're agitating it, you might cause stress onto the project. So it's important to just be gentle here. And all we're trying to do is make sure that the project is fully saturated and there are no dry spots. And yeah, the massaging, I think, also helps relax the fibers. So anyway, that is all you need to do for that step. Now, all that's left is we are going to set a 20-minute timer. We're going to let our project soak for that 20 minutes. Then we're going to come back and start the process of pinning it to the board. So I will be right back. Okay, so 20 minutes have passed. Our shawl has been in our wash bath for the whole time. So now it's time to drain our bath, and we are going to use our towel in the very next step. Okay, so let's just grab the shawl and just tilt the wash basin to drain it all. So I like to grab the shawl as I drain it so that it doesn't fall into the sink. Okay. So that's like also to make sure that I'm not mixing the shawl with like food waste. Okay, so now we have the shawl. It is very wet and saturated. Very, very important step here is we are going to squeeze the water out of the project. We are not going to wring the project. Wringing the project can cause permanent damage. I have never seen that happen myself, but I have been told that wringing is not good for the project, so I've never tried. So I'm just passing along the information here. We're not going to be wringing the project dry. We are going to squeeze the water. So I'll give an example. So if you were going to wring the project, you would take it like this and twist it. But that's not what we're going to do. Just going to grab the whole project like this and squeeze. So you can see the water coming out of it. We're just going to reposition it a bunch of times and squeeze. So you don't have to be forceful here. We're just trying to get a decent amount of the excess water out. So I like to kind of go in segments as well. So like I'll take a small section of the shawl and then I'll like move to the next segment and squeeze. And that's just to help get any excess water out, because then the more water you get out, the better or the quicker it will end up drying on the blocking mat. So definitely just remember, the most important thing for this step is to not twist the yarn. So however you're holding it, just bring your hands together and squeeze. Okay, so that's probably as much water as I'm going to be able to get out of it by squeezing it. So then the next step is to use our towel. So let me just dump this water out. I'm going to put our shawl in the wash basin and take it over to the floor so I can spread out my towel and start getting excess water out even further. Okay, so we have our shawl that we just squeezed the water out of. That's ready to go. And we will need our towel for this step. So what we're going to do is just lay the towel out. I'm going to roll it out so that it's fully flat. And ready to put our shawl onto. So now we're going to grab our shawl and we're just going to lay it as flat as possible on the towel. So it doesn't have to be like perfectly flat or anything, just as long as it's mostly flat. Because right now all we're trying to do is get even more water out of the shawl. So something like this is already nice. Even though it's not perfectly flat, it's still going to be fine. So the next step is we're just going to roll this up like a burrito. So just roll this up. So now we have our shawl all wrapped in this towel like a burrito. We're just going to squeeze the water out like this. So again, we're not wringing the project. We're just squeezing down the whole length of the towel. So we're basically going to be forcing the water from the shawl into the towel. So I like to kind of like move it around in a couple different positions to just try and get as much water as possible out of the shawl. Some people even will like to step on it. You can do whatever feels right to you. This is what feels good to me. So once you have squeezed the shawl in the towel, we can set up our blocking mats. Okay, so here I am on the floor with my blocking mats all laid out. So the blocking mats are laid out in basically as close as to the shape of the shawl as possible. So if you're doing a big project like this, definitely I would recommend getting multiple sets of blocking mats, because you're going to need them for, you know, all the huge space that the shawl is taking up. So I'm going to do a time-lapse video of me pinning the shawl so that, you know, it's going to be kind of boring to watch the whole thing. But just to like show you what you'll be doing, what we're going to do is, and you can see I've already started here a bit. We're going to take the pins and pin the shawl on the board in the position that we want it to lay in forever. So on the top border, for example, I want the top to be totally flat. So I'm going to just make sure that the shawl is in the right position, and then I'm going to insert my pin through the work and into the foam board to hold it there in place. So I'm going to go around the whole shawl and pin the entire thing flat. You're going to see it stretch out. You're going to see the detail come out a little bit more, and it's going to be amazing. So I'm going to get to doing that, and I will be right back after that. All right, I have finished pinning my shawl to the foam mats. So the only thing left to do in the blocking process is to just walk away and let it dry. So I'm gonna leave it here overnight so that it can fully dry. And once it's dry, what's great about blocking, especially if you're using wool fiber or cotton fiber, when I take the pins out, it's gonna stay mostly in the same shape. It's not gonna shrink up or kind of go back to what it was before blocking. So that's one huge benefit of that. If you're using acrylic yarn, you may see that it shrinks kind of back to where it was. But again, like I said, you're at least getting a clean, nice smelling project off of it. So there is still benefit to doing it. And you, depending on the yarn, you may see some kind of lasting effect. But this in like wool will last a lot longer than the acrylic will. So I personally like to knit in wool or cotton. Those are my two preferred fibers. So yeah, this is a really good project. For the pins, so it's kind of hard to know where to start. And I know I did like a time lapse of it, but I wanted to explain a little bit more. So I start at the top if it's a shawl, any like flat surface that I know needs to be a straight line, that's a good starting point because it's really easy. These curved portions are a little bit more difficult. So I like to start at the top. I'll do the whole flat side first, and I kind of work from one end to the other. Then I come back to any other parts that are flat, like this. So and it doesn't need to be perfect. Like if you look really closely, they're not perfect, but it's good enough that it's gonna hold its shape. So the curved portions, we can't use these pins for because it's a curve. So what I highly recommend is using a lot of the individual pins as opposed to like one pin. The more pins you use, the more points you're adding onto this curve. So you can see I have a lot of pins here and the curve is very well structured. So on all of my wave portions, you can see I have lots of pins there. Because if you only do one pin, it's gonna look like a point versus a curve. So that's like a pro tip there. I would say if you have anything that's curved, just use individual pins and kind of follow the curve. The actual piece wants to lay a certain way based on the construction that we put into it when we made the piece. So what's great is all you have to do is really just follow that structure that's already there. You don't have to fight it. You just have to basically stretch it a little bit and pin it in place. Now, there is a concept called over blocking, and that would be if I really stretched this as far as possible and then pinned it. I don't really like to do that because one, it's gonna make it way, way too big. This is already massive. So we don't need it to be that big, and we don't need to expose every stitch like that. We just want to bring out the detail and kind of like fix these areas. Like this, for example, was very lumpy and now it's flat. So that's really the main goal of blocking. You don't need to pull on it for dear life or anything like that. You don't have to go so far. This is far enough, and this is going to be a great final product. So I'm going to leave this overnight. It's going to dry, and I will show you the final product. If you want to see a week by week of how I made this, I have a whole video series following my progress on this shawl. So definitely check that out if this shawl looks interesting to you. And stay tuned because I'm going to show you the final result of this as soon as it dries.
Okay, it is the next day and I have already removed the blocking pins from my shawl. So you can see that even without the pins now, it stays in the same shape and it basically retains this big, massive size. So yeah, now we can like take it off of the blocking mat and you can see like, wow, look how amazing this is. It is so nice that it stays flat like this. And like all those parts, like in the beginning, if you remember, this part was like very lumpy and was not laying flat, but now we can see that it lays flat. So that's like one of the major benefits of blocking is that
your work is going to be much more consistent across like the whole thing, even if you've done like different knitting or crochet techniques that are like, you know, not laying correctly. Blocking will fix that, and you're going to end up with a beautiful product like this. So I would say, like, for anything like shawls or sweaters that you're going to make for yourself, those are great items to block. There are certain things like blankets or like dish towels or something like that that, you know, you probably don't need to block because they're just going to get used and they'll probably just block over time just by use. And also you would need so many blocking mats to block a blanket. So I would say like it's mostly a useful technique for smaller things or as big as shawls, I guess. But anything bigger than that, unless you really want to, or unless the pattern is like full of detail, you know, if you made like a Stephen West blanket, then okay, you should probably block that somehow because it's gonna bring out the detail a lot. But yeah, other than that, that's everything you need to know about blocking. So thank you for sticking around and watching the whole video if you made it this far. um, so I hope you learned something, and I hope that you can take this wet blocking technique into your own fiber arts practice and reap the rewards just like I did. So thanks for sticking around, and definitely go check out the video series I have on the making of this shawl.